In this episode, I'm going to talk about where I was and what my experience was in Japan on March 11th, 2011. I lived in Japan for 5 years. After returning home to America, I have stories to tell. To my Japanese friends, listen for entertainment. To my friends who have lived in Japan, listen for nostalgia. To my friends who want to travel to Japan, listen for inspiration. Welcome to True Stories of Japan. Let me tell you a story. When I was in Japan, my first job was teaching English in an English academy, or as they say in Japanese, an eikaiwa. So I was an eikaiwa teacher, and I worked with other teachers, not in the same time, but we worked in the same company. And some of the other teachers told me that one of our students in one of the other branches of the company I worked for, one of our students was actually a J-pop singer. And that was pretty interesting. And I also heard that that student, who was a singer, was going to perform in Tokyo and invited all of us teachers to come to the performance. It was an outdoor performance, and we were all invited. The performance was scheduled for the night of March 11th, 2011. So a group of the teachers that I work with planned to go that night and planned to go together in a group. I was not going to go with them because I had a plan to meet one of my friends, a Japanese friend, for lunch earlier that day and then go to a museum together. And then after that, meet up with my friends at the concert that evening and then watch the performance. So I met up with my friend. We had lunch together at a restaurant, and then after that we went to the museum, and we were going to hang out and spend time during the day before I eventually went on to the performance that night. So me and my friend walked up to the museum and we entered. And as soon as we walked into the front door, everything started shaking. And the part that we were in was really heavy, but it was shaking so strong and so violently that we just were kind of surprised. And it kept going and kept going. And it felt longer than it was because not soon after it started shaking, one of the museum workers came running at us full speed, and he was pointing and he was shouting, "Hayai, hayai, hayai," like telling us quickly to get down. And he guided us to crouch down behind that front desk that checks people in when they enter the museum. So we were crouching behind there, and things kept shaking and kept shaking and kept shaking and kept shaking, and it kept going on and on. And my friend said, "Wow, this is really long," and I thought so too. Now I've been in maybe just a couple of earthquakes. One notably when I was in Taiwan, and maybe one when I was in Japan, but nothing like this. Nothing that lasted this long or was this strong at all. And I remember looking out of the window at buildings in the distance, like tall buildings, apartment buildings, and they were shaking, and I could see them shaking from far away, and I realized how really strong that it was. Finally, eventually, it stopped shaking. Everything stopped shaking. Now, once it was over, we were told we had to leave the building, and it made sense, and it made sense a lot more once my friend had explained to me that they have to check the building to make sure that something from the ceiling wasn't loose or something like that before people could go back into the building. It's a safety matter. So I totally understood we had to go outside. And as we went outside, we saw people from other buildings also coming outside. So lots of different people coming outside. There were people in a different building across the street that was a company office in that building, and they all came out wearing hard hats. And I don't know, for those of you who've never been to Japan, in case you don't know that a lot of company offices keep hard hats in their office. So just in case there is an earthquake, people can put them on their head as they walk out of the building to protect them in case something loose gets shaken from the ceiling and falls down. Since Japan is a place that has lots of earthquakes, people do come prepared, and safety is very important. I remember seeing that too among the different groups of people that walked out, and not close to each other, but just the different buildings up the street, people coming out of them. Once me and my friend were out of the building, she told me that she was worried about her mother and worried about if she was safe and how she was at home. And she really needed to get home to check on her. I totally understood. So I walked with her to the bus stop so she can catch the bus to go home. And she did. So we said goodbye. She got on the bus. She went home. And then after that, I was on my own. I remember the next thing that I decided to do was go to the nearest train station. And I went down into the train station. And there were a couple of people waiting for trains, but not many people down there. And I never experienced something like this before in Japan, so I didn't know what was going to happen. And this was very soon into my time in Japan. I'd say it's the first 6 months when I was there. And I remember standing there looking around, not that many people waiting for trains. In fact, I seen people coming back upstairs. And at the time, as soon as I went down there, I didn't connect in my mind about the trains or what they would do after an earthquake. And in that moment, I put my hand on the wall, and it was a solid stone wall, but under my hand, it felt like water, and it was moving. And that freaked me out. And I just thought, I am definitely not safe down here, or at least I didn't feel safe. So I just turned around. I walked right back upstairs. I did not want to be down there after the earthquake. And I thought, you know what? I probably should not be underground. And I was not down there that long, but all of this happened just in a matter of a few minutes. Not thinking yet about what the train would do after an earthquake, seeing not many people and people walking back upstairs, feeling the wall, how it felt moving like it was water or jelly, and then walking right back upstairs. So I walked back up to the street level. And when I got up to the street level, there was aftershock. The ground underneath my feet was wobbling and moving. It felt like jelly under my feet, and it was really hard to walk. And I remember looking up at the light poles, and they were shaking. And I couldn't even keep standing up because of how it was like jelly under my feet, and the earth was moving under me, and I had to sit down. Once the ground stopped shaking and I was able to walk again, I decided to go to another train station. That was my first instinct. So I ended up walking like really far to get to the next station, and there was nobody there. There was nothing going on. In fact, we couldn't even go in. So I tried to talk to one guy who was working there at the door, and there was a language barrier. And he spoke only Japanese. He didn't speak any English. And in my case, I was still only there 6 months. I had not yet made the transition from the Japanese that I learned in classes in college to being able to speak in a real place. And anyone who's ever been in that experience of having taken Japanese in America, like in college, like I did, and then transitioning into using Japanese in real life situations. That's a big transition and it takes time. And because I was still new in Japan, it was my first 6 months, I had not made that transition yet. So I had a language barrier and that was working against me. And somehow, though, talking to him, we still managed somehow at least to understand between us that the train is stopped. That was what I got out of it. And and there's not going to be another one. So I need to go somewhere else. And that's what we got out of trying to communicate with each other. So I ended up walking to wherever the next train station was. That's the only thing I could think about. And I knew there was not going to be another train, but I still had to think, well, what else am I going to do? Where else can I go where there's some kind of operation going on that deals with people? So I ended up walking really far to find the next station. And I ended up walking for 5 hours to the next station. I was in an area where there weren't lots of train stations. And as I finally arrived at the next train station, the sun had gone down. That's how long I had been walking. So I finally arrived in a new area, which was a commercial area. There were businesses. And at this point, when I reached this area and this time of the evening, there were lots of people outside walking around. So the first thing I thought of, especially not knowing how to travel anywhere, I had to work the next day. And the first thing I thought was, I need to tell my job that I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to be there. That's the first thing I thought of, because my job was basically my existence in Japan, and that had to be right. If anything had to be right, that had to be right, and I needed to let them know. At first, I couldn't make any phone calls, and the phone system was completely blocked, or it was off, or it was out of service. There was something happening that made it impossible to make a phone call. And it wasn't until sometime later that the phone service started back up, and then I could finally call my company. I learned later that when an emergency like this happens, all the phone systems are taken over by the authorities for whatever communications they may need or something like this for emergency purposes, and until they're working again. And once that time ended and they were working again, then I could call my company. For that initial period of time when the phones were down, I was just out there. I was just standing outside, watching people walk around. I felt lost. I felt helpless. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck. Everything about being stranded and stuck and not even being able to see the future, the next 5 minutes or whatever. I was just in that moment until somehow the phones turned on, because I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't even know the phones would even turn back on again. I had no idea. I just thought, I'm stuck out here with no phone and nothing to do and no direction. But finally they turned back on, and I was so relieved at that time. Then I could actually get back to trying to do something and figure out what to do next. So I made a phone call to my company, and I just explained to them that there's been this big earthquake and I'm stuck and I'm far from home, a ways from home anyway, because I didn't live in central Tokyo at the time. I actually lived in Chiba Prefecture, and I was maybe like an hour away from Tokyo, which right in the train is not a big deal, but when you're stuck and you can't get on the train, it becomes a big deal. So I called and I left a message just explaining the situation, and then I had to figure out what I was going to do next. The next thing I can think of was maybe I should try to go to a hotel. So I went to a hotel. They were full. They told me they were full. Then I went to another hotel that was nearby. They told me they were full too. And while I was there in the lobby, they had a TV screen. And I remember looking at the TV screen and they showed scenes of the earthquake in other areas. And that's the first time that I had seen something about the earthquake happening other than just my own eyes. But even still, that's still all that I saw about what happened. All I know at this point is there was an earthquake, I experienced it, and there's an earthquake on the TV screen about what just happened. That's it. That's all that I had seen or knew about what happened at the time. And now I'm realizing that I'm having a major problem because I can't really leave, and I'm probably going to have to stay in Tokyo for the night, and I don't know where that's going to be. So I don't know. Now I really did not know what to do. But one thing I thought to do was call my Japanese friends. So I started to call different friends that I had their number saved in my phone, and one by one I could not reach anybody. It was really hard to get anyone on the phone. I guess it's understandable because this massive earthquake just happened and it affected everybody in a different way. But I did have one Japanese friend who answered and talked to me. And she was at home and she was at her computer, and she told me that the next thing that I should try to do is find a place to stay. But she told me that most people probably very quickly went to the hotels as soon as the earthquake happened because they knew they were not going to be able to go home. Now, I had never been in a situation like this, and I didn't think to do that when this first happened. So I was already at a disadvantage. But she said she was going to try to help me, and I told her my location. I told her where I was, and she got on her computer and she started to search a map of the neighborhood I was in and to look for hotels that were near me. So I was on the phone with her, and she was trying to find places for me to go. Now, in the meantime, while she's doing that, I stayed on the phone with her. I realized I probably need some kind of food and water if I'm going to be here in the night. So I went into a supermarket. I found a supermarket, and I went in there just as they were closing. And all I could find to get with that short amount of time was I tried to get something that might last, that wouldn't spoil. So instead of getting something that was fresh, I just got like a couple of bags of chips and a couple of bottles of water. And I bought that right before they closed. So, and the whole time that I'm in there looking for that, I've got her on the phone. And then I walk out after I bought this stuff, and I have a bag with that stuff in it. She's still on the phone. And then she told me about a capsule hotel nearby. So I still have her on the phone. I'm walking to the capsule hotel. I asked them, they're full. They don't have anything. I told her that. She was still looking for more places for me. But as I'm still outside and I'm on a phone with her, I noticed at the train station there were a couple of salarymen, men wearing suits with a briefcase who were working in a company, and they were laying on the sidewalk, and they were sleeping using their briefcase as a pillow. And the main thing that I thought is, I do not want to do that. I don't want to end up like them. I don't want to sleep on the street. If I could do anything, is just finding a place where I can sleep so I did not have to sleep outside on the street. I could not imagine doing that. So I still had my friend on the phone. I continued to walk around. They were trying to tell me where to go. And then I noticed my battery was low on my phone. So as my friend was searching for a place for me to look next, like a hotel, I realized I really better find a way to charge my phone. I need to do something. And I found there was a phone service store that sold accessories and things that maybe I could use to charge my phone and to keep my power going so I could still continue to get help from my Japanese friend to navigate. But as soon as I got up to the phone store, they were closing up. And when I say closing up, I mean they had just closed the door as soon as I walked up to it. And they were about to pull down the metal gate in front of it. And I tried to explain I had a problem, my phone, no battery, please help, so I can talk to my friend. And the guy that I talked to just did not care at all. He just waved his hand like, go away. And I used what little Japanese I could do to explain. He still didn't care. He just waved, go away. Didn't care. It wasn't his problem as far as he was concerned. I was so upset right when that happened. And I knew that he could understand in general what I was asking for. He knew it was a disaster. He knew that he could have helped someone in that moment, but he didn't want to do it. So I was stuck with my battery getting lower and lower. And at this point, no way to charge it or to save it or keep it on to keep talking to my friend, where I still didn't have a place to stay. So I kept walking and kept talking to my friend. I told her about the battery, and she said she'll still keep trying to help me as long as my phone is working. Continued to walk, look for places. She was searching things on her computer, and then the battery on my phone went dead, and I did not have a phone service anymore. Disconnected from my friend, no place to go, and no way to navigate anymore with anyone's help. After that, the only thing I could think to do was go to a bus stop, see if a bus would take me somewhere, anywhere. I don't even know what bus I was going to try to get on. And at this point, there's lots of traffic. Traffic is gridlocked. It's up the street, there's just cars. They're in a row and they're not moving. It's a long traffic jam that's moving very slowly. So I just sit at the bus stop. All I could think was get on a bus. It'll take me somewhere. Maybe I can get off somewhere else and figure out what else I could do based on what I see on the street. That's all I could do. But then someone came up to me and spoke to me in English. It was a Japanese woman. She was about middle age. Maybe she was in her 40s or maybe early 50s. And she spoke to me in English. And she asked me, where am I going? And I said, I don't know. I explained that I've been walking for hours. I've been walking since the sun went down. I went to hotels and they were full. I didn't know what to do. I had a phone that I was using to talk to a Japanese friend who was trying to help me, but it went dead and I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go. And I knew I'm stuck in the city, but I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said I don't want to sleep outside, but I don't know where to go next. If I could find a place to sleep, and I don't even know where to look or where to go. And when I told her this, I guess she felt something, and she told me that she asked me if I would like to tag along with her, and maybe she can help me. And so she took it upon herself that she wanted to help me to find a place where at least I can stay. And there was a hotel across the street. When she looked around, she saw there's a hotel. So we walked together and we went there and we asked them and they were full. And we're just standing there in that moment and she's just still standing there just thinking and looking at me and just thinking. And she had somewhere to go.
In the United States of America.
Tell that something in her did not want to leave me alone. So she said, come on with me. We're going to continue and keep searching. So we are walking and we come across to where there's a bus about to approach. In this gridlock traffic, a bus is about to approach. So we were at a bus stop right when the bus came, and luckily we got on and we sat down, and there's other people on the bus. And while we're sitting there and we're gridlocked in traffic and it's not moving, she said to me that she speaks English because she had lived in Hawaii before. And she said when she was in Hawaii, she was in a foreign country for the first time and people helped her. And she always remembered that. And she said she understands how I feel because she also went through that too when she was in Hawaii. And there were people in Hawaii, Americans, who helped her. And she knew that I was from America and she wanted to do something for me because she understood how it felt to be in the situation. That's what she explained to me. And then I really understood why she helped me. If not for her, I don't know what would have happened to me that night. But we were on a bus together and we were going to go forward. Now, she said that she wanted to get to her father. Her father's elderly. He's really old. And she's worried that he might be hurt because he's by himself. And she needed to get home to be there for him. And that's all she wanted to do. So I told her where I lived, and where she lived was on the way to where I lived, even though I would have had to gone much farther. And we came with the plan that we would go together to where she lives, and I would keep going until I get at least closer to where I live, and then maybe I can figure out how to find my way back to my home. And that's what our plan was. It was the best plan we had, and it was definitely better than whatever I was doing before because I was at a dead end and I had no other things to do. So that was a plan, and we were on the bus to go in that direction. And once we were on the bus, we were sitting gridlocked in traffic. Things were not moving, and then the bus driver makes an announcement. So he made an announcement, and as he's giving the announcement, the woman who's helping me, she explained what he was saying. And he was saying that we are traveling to, and he said the next place, and the next place was just like 10 minutes down the street. And he announced that it was going to take an hour and a half to get to that point. So the next stop, which normally would have taken 10 minutes, was going to take an hour and a half. And as soon as he announced that on the speaker in the bus, everybody in the bus at the same time went, eh? Like everybody was shocked, like, what? It's going to take that long to get there? And he said, you're welcome to get off the bus if you want to, but that's how long it's going to take. So we're sitting on the bus trying to think what to do, me and the woman that was helping me. And then she started to talk to two people sitting behind us. After she talked with them for a moment, she explained to me what they said. So I said, what did they say? And she said that they know a place nearby that's taking people in to sleep, and asked if we want to go with them. And she asked me, is that okay? I said, sure. I said, wherever that you want to go, if you know a good place, I'll follow you wherever because I trust you. So those two people behind us and the woman and me got off the bus. And it's the darkness. They're walking. I'm just following her. I'm walking behind her. Wherever they go, I'm just going and just following. I trust in her. They know what they're doing. We're working together, and they're helping me with something that I could not have done by myself. And eventually we walked up to this gate with some building. I don't know what it is, but she told me this is the place. This is where you can stay. I'm going to continue with them, and we'll figure something out. And I understood because she knew how to navigate the place a lot better than I did. But this was a place where I could stay. And she said she wished me the best, and we kind of did like a semi-hug, and she told me good luck, and I told her thank you so much for helping me. I would not be here if it wasn't for you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So then I went to the building. I went up there. She explained that I needed to stay, and they said yes, okay. So I went in there, and I couldn't really tell where I was inside of there, but there were familiar things. There was like some kind of front desk. There was a gym where a bunch of people were sleeping on the floor, and that's where I had to sleep, on the floor. They gave us blankets and pillows, and there was no heat because electricity was out, and it was lots of families, lots of mothers and kids, and just people in general. I'm pretty sure I was the only person who was not Japanese in there. Everyone in there was Japanese except for me. So I just laid on the floor, and I made the best of it to go to sleep. I remember during the night I got up to go to the restroom, and when I went to get to the restroom, I saw a bunch of things look like sticks laying against the wall. It wasn't later that when I had this memory, I learned what those were. Those were kendo shinai. But I didn't realize it at the time. That's what that was. So, and there were also a bunch of
the name of
lockers
the school
that I didn't realize until later. Years later,
I learned
of what I saw.
I was
those
in
were
a
shoe
high
lockers
school.
that people keep shoes in. So I went back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up, and it was daylight, and it was in the morning, and there were maintenance workers walking around or hanging out, and I went to one of those maintenance workers, and I asked him in the best Japanese I could come up with. I just said, "Kore wa doko desu ka?" That's what I said. And he said to me in English, he said, so I said, okay. I said, arigato gozaimasu. At that time, I had learned Japanese by writing, and I knew it in my head, but it was still hard to communicate verbally. That does take time. It does come when you're in Japan longer, but at the time you had to think, and did I say it right, and did I make a mistake? And that's what I said, but we still communicated, and he used English to communicate with me, and I really appreciated that. So I had
asked
been to
them,
that station before. I need to take the train, or is the train running? And they said, yes, the train is running. And you pointed and said, go this way. And when I got ready to leave, I made sure he walked me out to the sidewalk. Actually, before I went out there, they handed me a pack of crackers and some water, and then pointed me in the direction. And I walked that direction, and then I came to the train station. Luckily, I knew how to get home from that station. And the reason why is because while this happened in March 2011, just a couple of months earlier in January, I had not walked through the neighborhood like that. But once I got to that station, I recognized the station, and when I got in there, I could find my way back home on the train. And then I got on the train. The train went really slowly because they needed to be careful, so there wasn't, in case there was some kind of damage to the train line. And I was on the train with lots of people. It's going very slowly to go back home. Once I arrived back home, in the neighborhood I was in, there was traffic gridlock there, and there were lots of people in long lines outside of supermarkets, convenience stores, and everything. My main thing was just to get home. When I got home, I noticed there were things in my home that were on the floor, like things had been tossed around from the earthquake. And the first thing that I needed to do was open my laptop computer and communicate with my family to
on an
talk
American
with them.
news website.
And I remember I got on there, and the first thing I did was communicate with my mom. So my mom had sent me many messages asking me, "Am I okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And among the messages she sent me, one of them was about the nuclear disaster. And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" I have the TV on at that time on the news, and there's just a guy at the podium, and he's talking very calmly, and that's all that I saw on TV. So I didn't understand what my mom was talking about nuclear anything. So then I go to a website online, and when I opened it, it was flames and destruction was on their front page. And I was like, what in the world's going on? They showed that there was a tsunami. I didn't know there was a tsunami because I was stuck in Tokyo the whole time at night, just trying not to have to
From
sleep
that
on the
American
street.
news website.
That's the first time I had learned that there was a tsunami, by seeing that online. And there was fire, and there was rushing water, and things were completely flooded, and everything, like cars float, things like that, everything. They showed all this on their website. And then they talked about the nuclear disaster. There was something happening at a nuclear plant, and it was at risk. And all this news was on there, and my mom had seen all of it. And I'm in Japan just with a TV, and it's just a guy at a podium, and I didn't know any of this stuff. Of course, there was no way to know it at the time where I was, but when I got home, the only way that I could see what was really happening in Japan was I didn't have another source to know what was happening. And I'm in Japan, and I'm in the situation of being at risk. And I think it's very important to know like what's happening around you and what you're dealing with. But fortunately, because I got the message from my mother, and because I saw different news outlets, especially from America, that I knew actually what happened, because there was no way for me to know far away from me. So I'm really glad that I was able to see that and to understand what was happening. So the next thing I remember that, I went through that day, I went to sleep, and the next day, I remember, I think it was the next day, but at some point there was the next day that I had to go to work. There was an emergency meeting, and everybody gathered together. We talked about what we were going to do and where we were going to work and things like that. And I remember going to a place to work, and I was at my workplace, and that's when there was news from Japan that the emperor was going to speak to the nation. And the emperor does not often speak on television. So when that happened, I knew that this really was a really serious thing, and that was why he appeared. And I remember watching his speech on my smartphone when I was in the prep room of my workplace. And I was listening to his speech, and the place I was listening to, they had like subtitles, and I got the message from him. And as soon as he finished, the person I was working with came to me and told me that someone from my company had resigned and was going to go back home. Furthermore, they told me that there were other people that had started to quit their jobs too. And it was a number of people who decided to leave. Now, I think each person has to make their own decision and make their own choice. And I understand, because at the end of the day, it's about your own safety, and you have to do what's best for you. And if you have a family back home in your country, they're going to care about you, and they're going to talk to you, and you've got to have a honest conversation with them about what do you want to do. Do you want to stay there? Do you want to try to stick it out and stay longer? Or do you feel it's better to go home and just be safe for the time being, and then decide what are you going to do next? So each person has their own decision to make, and I understand that. But that was happening around me, of people resigning and leaving while I was there. Now, I will also point out that the people that I worked with who decided to quit their job and leave, they were not the only people who decided to leave the area when this happened. I had a friend, a Japanese friend, who lived in Tokyo, who I had hung out with. She actually left and went to South Korea for like more than a month, for about a month or more, while everything was happening, until it seemed like things were under control, and then she came back. So even in her situation, I understood her situation too. She cared about her own safety and well-being and what was happening in Tokyo, and not just Tokyo, because this was something that happened closer to like Sendai, Fukushima, that area, further up north. That's where the epicenter and the worst of it was. And down in Tokyo, we were affected by the earthquake and the aftershock and disrupting everything. So, but even still, she lived in Tokyo. She still was affected enough by it, and especially the nuclear reactor problem, that she felt it was in her best interest to take a break and to go somewhere else and do something in another country for a while until it became for certain what was going to happen. And that's what she decided to do. And I'm not inside of her mind of why she decided to do that, but again, I guess she did what was best for her, and I can understand, because people have to think about their own well-being, what's best for them, what's best for themselves. Each person has their own life, and people make decisions for what's best for themselves. And she made that decision. She eventually came back to Japan later, after things had started to calm down, but she made that decision to leave too. And I think it's each person's own decision. Just like the people that I work with who quit and decided to leave, just like she decided to go to South Korea, and she decided to come back. And the people who left, I don't know if any of them came back or if they stayed in their home country, but both of those people, some of them who are from different countries, and my friend who's Japanese and born and raised in Japan, each of them decided that they needed to move to somewhere else for a while. And in both cases, I understood and I respected their decisions to do that, because it's really a personal decision. As for me, I had to make my own decision. Now, I was ready to stay, and I was trying to make the best of the situation. I remember that I still continued working. Our company still continued operating. I remember there were rolling blackouts, so different neighborhoods would have their power out at certain times, and they announced in advance when it was going to be. And I remember being at work, knowing that there was going to be a blackout in the neighborhood we were working in, and we had flashlights ready. And I remember one time when the lights went out, actually we had the people we were teaching, they left first. We stayed with the office. When the lights went out, we used flashlights to see ourselves out of the building and then find a way to go home. And the train schedule was different, so we had to figure out where to get on the train and how to get home and what hours they were running. It was really hard and difficult, but we were still doing it. I remember the next day after working one of those days, I went to go get food, and I went into the supermarket and everything was gone. It was cleared out. There was nothing in there. There was so many things taken. The one thing that there was plenty of, for whatever reason, was Coca-Cola. I don't know the reason why there was so much Coca-Cola. I don't know if it's because people did not want to buy it during the emergency, or if it's because their supply chain was so strong that they were able to supply it no matter what. I don't know what the case was, but there was plenty of Coca-Cola, but everything else was out. Water was out, rice was out, basic food stuff was out. Now, I did come across one place that did have rice, like the pre-cooked rice that was in the container, but they had a sign on it saying like there's a limit of how much you can buy. But because people were buying up everything so much. Toilet paper was bought up. That was hard to find. Tissues that you used to blow your nose, those were bought up because people, I suppose, were going to use that as toilet paper when toilet paper was not available. I remember once being in a supermarket when they were putting new water, bottled water, like the large bottle, on the shelf. And the worker came and started putting it up. And as soon as he put it up, people rushed over and started grabbing it. And I remember seeing some woman just grabbing a bunch of them with two arms with this panic look on her face, just grabbing it. And they took it off the shelf as soon as he put it there and bought it up. And, people were, trying to make sure that they could survive and have what they needed. I understood that. But at the same time, so much stuff was getting bought up that there was nothing left on the shelf. And, I have no idea if people were getting just what they needed or if people were stocking up and people were getting extra because out of fear of running out. But everything ran out way faster than it normally would, and there was hardly nothing left. And that was a big challenge of finding food to buy because everything was going and all the shelves were cleared, and it was so hard just to find food anywhere. It looked as if people were probably buying more things than they needed, but at the same time, people try to survive, and that's what human beings do when they're in a situation like that. Food, water, everything, toilet paper, everything. But I did manage to still find enough food to buy that would at least let me live for a couple of weeks. And also I ended up bottling a bunch of water. So just in case, like a lot of big bottles I had that were used, I filled them up with water from the tap just in case if something happened and let's say if water went out, I'd have water. I don't know why I thought to do that, but someone suggested to do that. I don't know if I needed to do that, but this is the kind of advice that I heard. So I just did that just in case. So I had some food, at least for like 2 weeks of food in my freezer in my home. And also I had large bottles of water collected. So I was doing the things that I needed to do, and I felt like I was doing okay. But at the same time, I still really worried about the nuclear reactor situation, and I remember following that news the best I could as the days were going by. And during this time, I did have a friend back in America who's a bit older, who's a Japanese American, and who definitely felt close to this situation. And I kept in touch with her, and she told me that no matter what happens, do what you think is best for yourself and your own safety. That's what she told me. I think she maybe felt that I should maybe not be in the place I'm in, but she asked me to please take my own safety seriously. That's the way that I remember her telling me. And I remember thinking about that. And then that night, I had a dream. When I woke up, the dream that I remember having, I remember looking through a big book. And it was a book of like history of Japan. And it started in the earliest days of people on the island. Then I remember in my dream, I turned the page, and the next page was samurai, and then I turned the page again, and the next page was World War II, and then I turned the page, and the next page was modern times, and skyscrapers, and business, and economic success. And then I turned the page, and there was this disaster that happened. And there was lots of people looking really sick. And there was a nuclear disaster at the end of that page. Then I turned the page, and there was nothing. It was just like a dark page. And there was like, in my mind, there was this question mark of, does the nation move on? Does it survive after this? And it was unknown. And it was like on the page, I remember there being like question marks of the year that was listed of what period of time it was. And it was dark. I don't know if it meant like unknown of what's going to happen next, or what happens to the survival of the country. I have no idea. I have no idea what it meant, but it was something unknown. And then I remember waking up and the feeling of knowing that regardless of what's happening in other countries, what I was experiencing at that point, and the uncertainty and the fact that the nuclear disaster was, they were fighting that every day and trying to control it. It was like living through the end of the world. That is exactly what it felt like. And I remember my friend in America, my Japanese American friend, and what she said. And then I thought, you know what? I think I probably need to move from where I'm at. I was not ready to leave Japan, and I had to have that conversation with myself, and a real honest conversation. I had waited so long to go to Japan. Those of you who have remember the story that I told in the first episode that was in 2 parts about everything I went through to make it to Japan, which lasted years of my life, and I finally made it, and it was a dream come true. I wasn't ready to give all of that up. I'd still only been in Japan for 6 months. So it was hard for me to decide to come home, and I had an opportunity to go home. I had a relative who worked in an airport and said that he could get me a ticket from anywhere to the city he was in. And I had to really decide, is that what I want to do? Because if I leave, will I ever come back? Is this all that my experience is going to be? What is my life going to be after this? I didn't have answers. I did not have answers for those things. So what I came up with a solution. My plan was to leave the Tokyo metro area and to get away from all of the uncertainty and all the effects of the disaster, and go to a different part of Japan that was calmer, where I can clear my mind, and where I could make arrangements and make plans for starting a new job working in a different part of the country. So that was my solution, and I talked to my family about it, and I talked to my mom, and I told my mother that, I had gone through so much to get to Japan. I had waited so long to be there, and I just felt like this experience could not be over after just this short amount of time. And I felt that the journey needed to continue. And I told her that I had thought it out logically and rationally. I knew that all of the country was not affected in the same way, and that maybe things could be better if I just lived in a different part of the country and then see how it goes. And my mom thought I was crazy, why I wanted to stay in Japan longer after everything that had happened. And I understand her side because, if any parent, especially a mother, has a child, even an adult child, living somewhere and they're far away and they could be in danger and you can't do anything and they're not going to leave, I could understand. That could be really difficult. And even now, my mom understood, but I feel really sorry if I had put her through things emotionally with the decision that I made. But as time has moved on, my mother looks with pride of the time that I spent in Japan and that I went for something that meant a lot for me. Looking back, that's how she has communicated to me, and I understand that's how she felt. And I appreciate that from her because she still respected my decision, even though I think it affected her at the time. But now that we look back and time had moved forward, I think she respected my decision and the fact that I was able to be in Japan longer and experience so many more great things. That's something that she really, I think, respected me for, and really is proud that she had a child who had these experiences, things that she hadn't done, and she in some way was kind of, I think, living through me, that she could see the things that I did, and it even enriched her life by us going through the journey kind of together as I lived in different places and kept in touch with her, and she was there along the way with me. So in the end, I ended up making arrangements and left the Tokyo metro area, and I took Shinkansen, the bullet train, to a different part of the country that was calmer, that was away from everything, and I was able to start new and have a continuation of my journey in Japan. In the end, when I arrived at my new destination with my new job, what I can say is the next year would be a great year in my life. It was the first time that I ever taught in public school. So I transitioned from working in Eikaiwa, which I did before in the Tokyo metro area, to working in a public school. And that's the first time I ever did that. I had deep cultural experiences. I made great friendships, and overall was something that was really meaningful and enriching in my life, and also allowed me to overcome a lot of the things that I had seen and experienced when this disaster happened. So this concludes my own story of what happened on March 11th, 2011. The reason I tell this story is because there were many people that I know were like me, who had a language barrier and maybe even were new to the country and did not know their way around and were affected by it and maybe in a similar way as I was. And it was really difficult when you don't know what's happening around you. You don't really yet have all of the ability to communicate with people, and your life is in jeopardy when you don't know where you're going to be, where you can sleep, or anything. But one person who spoke English and had the kindness in their heart to help someone else made all the difference. One Japanese lady who had lived in America and had some English ability saved me, basically. She saved me. And I don't know where I would have been that night if she hadn't done that. So what I do want to say out of this story is, if we can get anything out of it, just know that when someone comes to Japan from a different country, they're leaving behind their parents, their family, their hometown, the people that care about them, and they're giving all of that up to contribute something to Japanese society and to Japanese people, and do make a sacrifice. And when something like this happens, and when a person is there, like I was, that we go through it too. And in some cases, there's different things we go through that may be harder, because we are. If you're in a situation where you are still adjusting, and you still haven't totally adjusted, like I was. Now, as time went on, I did adjust much better. My Japanese language became much better. Being able to navigate the country became much better. But I was at risk. But it just takes one person to have kindness and to care and to put their effort forward to help someone else. And to me, that woman who helped me represent all the things that are the best about Japan. And the kindness she showed and the people like her, those are the things that I choose to remember and emphasize when I think about Japan and their heart towards other people, and especially people who come from abroad. That's what I like to remember, and I really appreciate what she did for me, and I really appreciate what the school did for me when I was there. and I will always keep those memories, and I really do appreciate them. For my Japanese listeners who are listening, just know that if you have kindness for someone else, especially if it's someone who is a visitor in the country or is from abroad and they're there to contribute something, just know that any bit of kindness that you can give to that person, it could mean so much. It might cost so little to give it, but it could mean so much to someone who's given up their family and the people who love them to be there and do something positive for Japan. I hope that you enjoyed this story. I hope that it meant something good for you, and that's what I think is meant to be gotten out of this story, that positive side. Now, in the meantime, we all understand that this was a terrible tragedy, and there were so many people that were hurt. There are so many people that did not make it through this tragedy that happened, and we always should do what we can to honor the memory of the people who were lost during this tragic disaster and event. What I experienced was very, very small compared to so many other people who were closer to the center of the disaster, people who were affected so deeply by it, and people who did not make it, and people who were close to those who did not make it, or people who were hurt. There may even be people who were in places I were, and they face different kind of effects of having lived through a disaster like that they might still be facing now or be dealing with now. They may not be physical things. They may be other things. So we all understand that even though those of us who had limited hardships that happened, there are still so many people that were affected more than we are. And we always should remember those people who were affected in all different ways. So thank you very much for listening to this story of my experience on March 11th, 2011. And deepest respects goes out to all of the people who were lost and the people who were affected by this tragedy. Japan, as a nation, has still managed to find its way to move forward and to recover. But we also always want to remember all of the people who were affected by this event. Thank you very much for listening, and I definitely wish and hope Japan will always have a brighter future, because I know that as a nation it's strong enough to get through even the most difficult of challenges. This is one of the things that I really respect about Japan, and I always will. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Stories of Japan. If you liked this episode, please follow this podcast. This podcast has new episodes every week, so please join again next week. See you next time.